Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to be looking at the small town of Lind, Washington.
Okay.
It's in Adams County.
All right.
And we've gone through and found a ton of really, really interesting historical records and census data.
Okay.
And we think it's a really neat story about how the American West kind of unfolded.
Yeah.
And it really shows the unique challenges that these smaller communities faced.
Mm-hmm.
So right off the bat, something that grabbed me is that the town's name was chosen by the Northern Pacific Railway
Okay.
way back in 1881 when they put a station there.
Oh, interesting.
But the origin of the name is completely unknown.
Oh, that is interesting. So we have this place that's been, brought into existence by this large external force, the railway.
Yeah.
But right from the very beginning, it has this little sort of mystery at its heart.
Yeah,
Makes you wonder about those stories that might be just out of reach.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty here.
Yeah.
The first real settlement that we can find started in 1888.
All right.
And that was with the arrival of two brothers,
Okay.
James and Dougal Nielsen.
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 Got it.
And they came in on that Northern Pacific line, just like you said.
Yeah.
And they arrived to basically a barren landscape.
It's amazing, isn't it, how you know that starkness is key to understanding what they then achieved.
Yeah.
You have the railway providing the means of arrival, that potential connection. But then it's really down to individuals like the Nielsen brothers to transform that raw environment, to build something from essentially nothing.
Yeah, they had their work cut out for them,
Right.
but they didn't waste any time.
Okay.
By the autumn of 1888, they had built the first residence.
Wow.
And then a couple of years later, they put up a store, and they got the postal service running again.
So prior to that, how are people even, getting their mail?
It was basically being tossed off of passing trains from Ritzville.
Oh, wow.
And so James Nielsen became the first postmaster.
It really highlights how important those kind of basic services are when it comes to making a community.
Oh, absolutely.
And the fact that it was the Nielsen brothers who took on those fundamental roles. It really just underscores how important those pioneers were.
Yeah.
What strikes you most about that really early period?
Just how quickly those sort of essential elements of community life just took root.
Yeah.
So like a home, a way to get supplies, communication, even education.
Yeah.
Just a year after they arrived, in 1889, they even opened their first school.
Wow.
And it only had 6 students.
Oh, that's a pretty small class size.
Yeah, pretty intimate. And then in 1890, they officially platted the town site.
Okay.
And it was tiny.
Yeah.
It was just 4 square blocks.
Wow. Very, very small.
But then this early development just kind of came to a screeching halt.
So what happened? What was the sort of reason behind that?
So in 1893, the Panic of 1893 happened.
Ah, a major economic downturn, of course.
Yeah.
That would certainly explain it.
And that brought this initial burst of development just totally to a halt.
I imagine a lot of young communities like Lind were really forced to become more self-reliant and resourceful.
Yeah.
Really rethink how they were going to go about things if they wanted to ensure their long-term survival.
Yeah, I bet that was a really difficult time for them.
Right.
But if we fast forward just a little bit to around 1899,
Okay.
things started to look up again.
Oh, good.
They had a bumper crop of wheat that year.
Oh,
It was an
wow.
exceptional local wheat crop,
Okay.
and the demand was increasing.
Right. So it sounds like that was the spark that really got things going again.
It's amazing, isn't it, how tied these early settlements were to how well local resources did.
Oh, absolutely. That was their livelihood.
Right. Yeah. It's a classic pattern in the development of the American West.
Yeah.
The land provides a valuable commodity, in this case, wheat, and that just drives economic activity.
Right.
And of course, it attracts more people looking for opportunity. Yeah. So that demand for wheat, it attracted a lot of people.
Okay.
And the town began to expand.
Uh-huh.
They got a new post office, a saloon,
Of
course,
got to have a saloon.
a lumber yard.
Yeah.
And by the end of 1899, the population was almost at 100.
Wow. So from 6 in a schoolhouse to 100, pretty rapid growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a real boom came in 1901.
Right.
There were brick buildings going up
Okay.
for a bank and other stores. And
Yes.
get this, hundreds of these temporary dwellings were quickly built for all the new settlers pouring in.
I can't even imagine that. All those
Yeah.
people just coming in, all that construction going on. It must have been such an exciting time.
Oh, yeah.
Really, it speaks to the optimism and the potential that people clearly saw in Lind.
Yeah.
And, that shift from those initial very simple structures to these more permanent brick buildings.
Yeah.
I mean, it shows a real growing confidence.
Yeah.
Like Lind was there to stay.
And it wasn't just businesses. They built a new school, 3 churches,
Oh, yeah.
and the population really took off between 1898 and 1903.
Okay.
And it reached about 600 people.
So from 100 to 600,
Yeah.
that's huge growth in such a short time.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was really finding its feet as a town.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see, not just the economic foundations being laid, but all these social structures, these community institutions springing up, and of course the establishment of the local newspaper,
Oh, right.
the Lind Leader.
Yeah.
That's always a really important indicator. A community starts to find its own voice,
Yeah.
its own identity.
Yeah.
It's kind of saying to the world, we're here, and this is who we are.
And it seemed like they were getting everything, more stores, restaurants, a second bank, real estate offices.
Oh, wow.
And then this all kind of culminated in a big step for the town.
Okay.
They incorporated on January 26, 1902.
Wow.
And who are the first officials?
I don't know. Who were they?
It was the Nielsen brothers.
Oh, wow.
Dougal was the mayor.
Really?
James was the treasurer.
So from building the first residence to now actually running the town.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, it's a real testament to their initial investment, their commitment, and also their continued leadership within the community.
Absolutely.
They weren't just the first to arrive. They were really shaping this town's development.
Yeah.
So it's a real legacy.
All right. So now we have a town.
Yeah.
It's established.
Right.
It's growing.
Okay.
What happened in the years that followed? Well, we know that the Milwaukee Road eventually laid tracks through the south side of town,
Okay.
and those tracks are now part of the John Wayne Pioneer Trail.
Really?
So it's interesting how those transportation routes just continue to kind of shape a place.
Yeah. I mean, even when their original purpose kind of changes, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah. It's a fascinating point. The evolution of that kind of transportation infrastructure.
Right.
You've got the Northern Pacific facilitating the initial settlement.
Yeah.
Then the Milwaukee Road comes along and adds another layer of connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, now those tracks are repurposed for recreation.
Yeah.
It really reflects how the economic and social landscape can shift over time, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
And speaking of shaping, the street naming in Lind is pretty unique.
Okay.
So the Nielsen brothers intended to name all the north to south streets to spell out their whole last name.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
But the town only grew large enough to get to Nielso.
Oh, really?
So it's like, Nielso!
That's a lovely detail.
Yeah.
This grand plan slightly curtailed by the realities of the town's size.
Yeah.
It's charming, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really gives you this tangible sense of the town's history.
Yeah.
And you can kind of imagine those founders with their big vision.
Yeah.
And it's a subtle reminder that even the most ambitious plans are, ultimately shaped by the practical realities of growth and circumstance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then we get into the local school's history.
Okay.
And it's seen its fair share of mascots.
Yeah.
So they started out as the Lind Bulldogs.
Okay.
Then they were the Lind Calotis Blue Devils.
Right.
Then the Lind Ritzville Broncos.
Okay.
And now they are the Lind Ritzville Sprague Broncos, which
Right.
is a 2B school.
Quite a mouthful.
Yeah.
And it's quite a journey as well.
Yeah.
Those changes in affiliations and mascots,
Yeah.
they often reflect shifts in demographics and this ongoing process of regional consolidation,
Yeah.
which you see in a lot of rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's interesting because those local sports rivalries,
Yeah.
they can become a really important part of a community's identity
Yeah.
and its social life.
Yeah. I mean, we do have some mention of a historical rivalry
Okay.
with the Reardon Indians and the Colfax Bulldogs.
Colfax Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Got it.
In football.
It sounds like a typical small-town sports scene,
Yeah, absolutely.
where those Friday night lights really bring everybody together.
Yeah. And it seems like the local high school's story is going to change again
Oh,
because due to state funding, it's slated to move to Ritzville,
okay.
though the middle school will remain in Lind.
I mean, that's a significant shift
Yeah.
for a community, isn't it? I imagine it must have a real impact on the town's sense of itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But maintaining that middle school in Lind at least ensures that there's still that educational presence in the town.
Exactly. Yeah. It keeps that connection to education alive,
Yeah.
which is so important for for any community.
So let's get into the geography a little bit.
Okay.
Lind is right near the center of Adams County,
Okay.
and it's sitting in this shallow Lind Coulee.
Lind Coulee.
Yeah.
Got it.
And it's described as being on the border between this really rich agricultural region and the channeled scablands.
Wow. That's quite a contrast in landscapes.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you've got this fertile farmland, and then on the other, you've got the channeled scablands, which are just this incredibly unique and dramatic landscape
Yeah.
shaped by those massive Ice Age floods
Yeah.
that kind of, carved out this incredibly eroded terrain.
I mean, that geographical dichotomy must have really influenced the early settlers and how the whole region developed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's also just east of where the Paha and McElroy coulees branch off.
Okay.
And it's about 5 miles west of Highway 395
All right.
at the intersection with the Lind-Ralston
Like Ralston.
and Lind-Colotus Road, which is State Route 21.
So quite a network of roads there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that area is known as East Lind on some maps.
Oh, interesting.
And State Route 21 goes right through the center of town.
Okay.
It becomes East 2nd Avenue.
Before it turns onto North I Street and then North 1st Street.
So it kind of snakes its way through,
Yeah.
right through the heart of the town.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then as that highway heads north out of town, the Lynn-Hatton and Lynn-Warden roads branch off to the west.
It sounds like a small town, but definitely not isolated.
Yeah.
Really well connected.
And it's tiny.
Yeah.
It's only 1.07 square miles.
Wow.
And it's all land.
So everything's within walking distance, really.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. In a town that size, you're bound to have a really strong sense of community,
Yeah.
where those connections between people are just so much easier to make.
Yeah, I bet everybody knows everybody.
Right.
But moving on to more recent times.
Okay.
The 2020 census recorded a population of 535.
Oh.
And that's a 5.1% decrease
Oh, okay.
from the previous census.
So it seems that Lind, like a lot of small rural towns,
Yeah.
is facing these population challenges.
Yeah.
Do we have any clues as to why?
I mean, we're not sure. It could be lack of opportunity. It could be changing agricultural needs.
Yeah, I mean, that population decline, it's a trend we see in many rural communities across the U.S.
Yeah.
And it's often this really complex mix of factors, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Evolving agricultural practices that require fewer workers,
Mm-hmm.
economic shifts, which means there are fewer job opportunities outside of agriculture.
Yeah.
And then, of course, younger generations sometimes moving to larger urban centers,
Yeah.
looking for education or career prospects.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So there's no easy answer.
No.
Yeah.
But then, more dramatically, in August 2022,
Okay.
the entire town was ordered to evacuate
Really?
because of a wildfire.
Oh, wow.
And sadly, the fire destroyed 10 homes.
Oh, no.
And they had to shut down local highways while firefighters worked to control it.
That must have been a really challenging time for the whole community.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that's got to be traumatic.
absolutely.
Mm.
Events like that, while devastating,
Yeah.
they often reveal the underlying strength and resilience of these small communities.
Yeah.
How people come together to support each other,
Mm-hmm.
especially those who've, lost everything.
Yeah.
But it also, of course, highlights how vulnerable these places are
Yeah.
to those kind of natural disasters.
Yeah.
And it really underscores just how important those community bonds are,
Absolutely.
when you're facing that kind of adversity.
Yeah. So, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into Lind, Washington,
Okay.
it's really a story that kind of encapsulates so much about the American West.
It is, isn't it?
It starts as a railway stop in what's essentially wilderness.
Yeah.
It grows into this agricultural hub, experiences both periods of significant growth and real challenges,
Yeah.
like economic downturns and these natural disasters.
Right. It's a compelling story of adaptation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lind's history really serves as this kind of microcosm of these broader trends, doesn't it? The role of railroads in opening up the West, those economic cycles
Yeah.
that are so tied to resource-based economies, the gradual development of all these, community institutions, the continuous need for, adaptation when things change.
Yeah, and we can't forget that initial mystery,
Oh, right.
the lost origin of the town's name.
Yeah, it's a small detail, but it really kind of lingers in the mind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This reminder that even with all the, documented history,
Yeah.
there are still these unanswered questions.
Yeah.
These little pieces of the past that just remain elusive.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a perfect illustration of how history is this kind of tapestry
Yeah.
of both the known and the unknown.
Yeah.
That little mystery invites us to keep asking questions and appreciate that every place has these layers of stories,
Yeah.
some of which, sadly, might be lost to time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's a final thought.
Okay.
Think about how this seemingly small history of a single town like Lind reflects these much larger patterns of settlement and growth and change across the American landscape.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And what does that resilience of communities like Lind that face economic shifts and natural disasters,
Yeah.
what does that really tell us about the people who call these places home?
It's a good question, isn't it? What does it tell us about their character, their strength, their determination?
It's so much more than just names on a map.
Absolutely.
It's a real story of human experience.
Yeah, and it's a story that continues to this day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lind is still there,
Yeah.
still evolving, still facing those challenges,
Yeah.
but still a community.
Still a community.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Lind, Washington.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. We hope you enjoyed it.
I certainly did.
And we'll see you next time.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.